I think he's got some of the best political instincts in the world, and perhaps in history. Listen, he's the most competitive person I've ever met. Okay, I've seen this guy throw a dead spiral through a tire. I've seen him at Madison Square Garden with a top coat on. He's standing in the key and he's hitting foul shots and swishing them. Okay, he sinks 3-foot putts. I don't see this guy as a guy that's ever under siege. This is a very, very competitive person. The president's a winner. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a lot of winning. The president has really good karma, okay, and the world turns back to him. He's genuinely a wonderful human being.
The mooch. Quite an eventful 10.5 days. You hardly knew you. Hard to believe a guy who loved the president that much would that last that short a period of time. But what a great and eventful 11 days it was. When Anthony Scaramucci was brought in as communications director, Sean Spicer immediately left as press secretary. Then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, he was shown the door, replaced by General John Kelly, a guy who President Trump says will make the best chief of staff ever. And everything then came full circle when General Kelly fired the mooch on day one.
I remember all of this like it was yesterday.
Exactly, and it wasn't much more than that, Andrew. Team Trump does have a tough job. The boss doesn't listen to anyone. That much we know after 6 months. But he tweets out whatever comes to mind, oftentimes without telling his own people. All right, Jerica, help us out here. First of all, on a broader sense, how is a media shop supposed to run? What is the chain of command for communications, including the boss?
I mean, there's supposed to be a clear chain of command. So you have a press secretary, you have a communications director. The press secretary reports to the communications director. The communications director, ultimately, at the end of the day, should be reporting to the chief of staff. Why? Because the chief of staff is that person who, if they have the appropriate access, which they should, given the title, knows everything that is happening policy-wise. They have their hands in everything. They have access to everyone, and they have access to the principal. The problem comes into play is when you have either a press secretary or a communications director going rogue, and all that information is not funneled up to the chief of staff and then on to the president. Right, so you have too many people trying to dictate the communication strategy, trying to put out the messaging, and then there is no one really speaking with the cohesive voice.
So when you diagnose what we've seen in 6 months from the messaging of this White House, is the biggest problem the president himself with the unfiltered tweets and not really running it through anybody? Is it the incessant leaking by all the different fiefdoms supposedly with all the different agendas? Or is it the communications team that hasn't crafted a message or at least a system, and now we're, I guess, on the fourth one now? Whose fault is it?
Yeah, I wish I could attribute it to one thing, but I think all three things played into it and played a factor, were huge factors. And I think, unfortunately, the first press secretary you had just did not, I think, have the respect of the president, did not have a strong enough temperament so that he would get the access that he needed in order to do his job and to do it sufficiently. The other problems that you mentioned, all are not good. You need a president that has someone that they can trust, that they will listen to. You know, you don't know everything. It's clear Donald Trump does not know everything. And there needs to be someone that's vetting every communication, whether it's via tweet, whether it's via statement, or whether it's, you know, a script. Oftentimes he goes off script. Someone needs to be vetting everything that he says, and he needs to have someone that he trusts, that when they push back and say, no, Mr. President, this is not the way to go on this, that he actually will listen. And that did not happen.
You know, we joke about the mooch, but he became the biggest story for 10 days. You've covered a bunch of different administrations. Let's just stay in New York City for a minute. Whether it was Koch, whether it was Dinkins, whether it was Rudy, even Bloomberg, did the communication person ever become the story where you weren't sure that they were speaking for their boss?
No, I can't think of a single incident. A smart politician, once the press secretary is the story, it's time for you to be shown the door. It's that simple. Albert Scardino jumped up, and David Dinkins was right. He was tired of the all-white press corps referring to him as David. And so Mr. Dinkins said, tell them to refer to me as Mr. Mayor. That was the end of Albert Scardino. He had to fall on his own sword, if you will, because Scardino said refer to him as Mr. Dinkins, and it was page one news. Whenever the press secretary, Mr. Scaramucci, Here's the first problem. He was completely incompetent. That's number one. The second problem, whenever some free advice for people in politics, when a reporter calls you up, we already have the story. We want to see how you're going to lie. We're going to let you set yourself up and hang yourself. That's exactly what happened in this situation.
Well, Scaramucci, I don't think Ryan Lizard had any idea he was going with.
No, I'm referring.
Nice insight into you reporters.
No. And other point that Brodsky made, Richard.
Mr. Brodsky.
Mr. Brodsky. And he's so right about this. If I were Trump right now, only a few people know that he had a role in crafting that email. Then the question becomes, who in that hierarchy is selling you completely out?
Dominic,
He's got a major
if he had
problem.
listened to the advice he just got, he never would have been elected
But
president.
one thing I can say about the Trump that I know, he notices everything. Richard, he knows the latest poll.
Elected
he
president.
knows who you know. Just like Bill Clinton.
Okay.
He
I got a
knows who's in
question
the
then for
room.
the table. To Dominic's point, the leaks. They've been a pervasive problem for this
Everywhere,
administration.
always.
Not like this. Not like,
Like
this.
this.
Not
So
like
you're
this.
General Kelly right now. Can you stop it?
Well, you just shot somebody, and if you
It didn't seem to stop. Look at the story that just came out today.
well, that may have been yesterday's leak. Kelly did something smart. He executed a hostage. That gives everybody else religion for a time being. But in the end, all of this bad advice that he just got to
Bad advice?
be conventional.
Richard's got an ulterior motive. People can't figure it. He wants Trump to keep being Trump here until next year for the midterms at the very least.
Okay.
What he's not being
fight him,
is,
all right.
yes, exactly. So,
I wish you were still talking because I would have hit you with a
yes.
bourgeois.
So,
Bourgeois?
Yeah, because not every White House leaks like this.
Jerk, I'm not. You were there in the De Blasio administration when it was a completely different reasons or whatever. But sometimes the boss didn't do himself any favors. What do you do when you have a boss who doesn't always follow the best advice, who doesn't get to an event when he's supposed to, or will go off message, or will pick a fight with the press when he doesn't? When the doors close, do you give that person tough love? How do you stop them from repeating similar mistakes? In the case of the president, it's of a whole different level. But nonetheless, how do you change behavior, or can you?
So it's a tough situation to be in. But I think the first thing you have to do is learn how to speak your boss's language. Each principal is different. And so it's two people can give the very same advice, and he will actually only listen to that one person because they learned how to communicate with them. So it's not just about external communication and telling the boss what they should and shouldn't say. It's learning how to, behind closed doors, talk that person down if they're going out to do something that's going to be detrimental, right? So the first thing is establishing a relationship. And so that, just looking at at the new chief of staff for Trump, that's what Kelly has to do right now. He has to establish a relationship. And I would argue, everyone wants to say that the reason Scaramucci is gone is because of Kelly. I would say that I think Scaramucci's star was getting a little too bright. And if we've noticed, if we look at Trump's track record, anytime anybody eclipses him, there's consequences and repercussions.
Andrew, really quick. Do you think we've seen anything, not just in 6 months, but in 70 plus years, that gives you, I know he's got a man crush on generals, okay? That this president will alter his behavior depending on, in this case, the chief of staff?
I think there's a slight chance with Kelly, only because he does seem very deferential to generals, which frankly might go back to his time at New York Military Academy as a child, but that's reading psychological tea leaves. But no, because Kelly can't be with him 24/7. He can't take the phone away from him. He can't stop him from the worst angels of his nature.
Well, we're going to find out soon enough here. Usually things travel in 24-hour increments for this White House, so we'll see if he can make it to the end of the week. Coming up next, Democrats, they're fighting for the soul of the party and also fighting over who ought to be the messenger or whether they even need a cohesive message. It's interesting to where Democrats see their best chances of success. Shut up and get out of the way or actually stand for something. We'll discuss after the break.